It's really quite devastating how corrupt the Trump administration is. Like, we knew how corrupt he was. That's all been well established. But the fact that the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, if you might recall, was nominated by Trump, his second of 3 Supreme Court nominees.
He's the beer drinker.
He's the beer drinker. And let's listen to, first of all, he was a Heritage Foundation recommendation, naturally. So he was nominated by Trump, and you might recall his Senate hearing with Kamala Harris questioning him about a woman's right to bodily autonomy.
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm happy to answer a more specific question. But
male versus female.
There are medical procedures.
Okay. That the government has the power to make a decision about a man's body.
I thought you were asking about medical procedures that are unique to men.
I'll repeat the question. Can you think of any laws that give the government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm not thinking of any right now, Senator.
That's exactly why people that haven't been to medical school should not be in hospital rooms and doctor's appointments. And I just want to state for the permanent record that he sucks.
He sucks.
The Heritage Foundation sucks. We can say a lot of eloquent ways about how badly they suck. This is the American Taliban, and they've penetrated the court thanks to Mitch McConnell. This is a minority Supreme Court, and it is so devastating for so many millions of American girls and women.
It's disgusting. And here is the most, even more disgusting than we all knew already. If you recall, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, a psychotherapist, came forward and testified that he sexually assaulted her in high school. And the Republicans were like, well, there's no cooperation. And Trump's saying, oh, well, the FBI, they have an open investigation. They can do whatever they want to research that. Well, guess what? As a matter of fact, that was a lie. The FBI was told, leave it alone, do not investigate. There was a tip line set up. None of those tips were investigated. They just went into the regular pile of FBI tip lines, and anything related to Kavanaugh went straight to the White House. You know what that's called? Fucking corruption at the highest order. Don't take my word for it. Take it from Sheldon Whitehouse, who is the leading Democrat on the judiciary.
Here is the nutshell summary of the report we released on the supplemental background investigation into Brett Kavanaugh. The first finding is that all that talk about the FBI having free reign and able to interview who it wanted was completely false. The entire investigation was completely directed by the White House, with the FBI only as the mere agent of the White House. The second point is that when we were told that this was done by the book, that was highly misleading because for supplemental background investigations, it turns out there is no book. We also found out that the directions were not to pursue corroborating evidence, only direct evidence. And then the Republican senators voting for Kavanaugh all said, oh, look, no corroborating evidence. Well, that was the plan all along. The last thing, the tip line was a complete sham. No tip was ever investigated by the FBI. The Kavanaugh tips were sorted out of regular FBI tip line traffic and delivered to the White House uninvestigated, where they all died, unless they were used to direct the FBI away from any good, meaningful witnesses. So this was not a legit investigation, as I think many of us surmised.
So then you find out there were over 4,500 tips about his sexual misconduct from high school, college, and law school. 4,500. That's a fucking huge number. And nobody did a fucking thing because they're corrupt. And here this man is on the Supreme Court deciding women's bodily autonomy. It goes all through me. I find it so disgusting that this man got up and cried and wah in front of Congress. I didn't do that. I just drink beer. Bullshit. how do you reconcile that? I mean, I really want to know, how do you reconcile that type of behavior and then decide that women don't have rights? Is it because you don't have any fucking respect for women at all, period? I mean, how does he act so pompous about his ability to make law when he is a serial sexual abuser?
Well, I think what's the red flags for me here is he's groomed by the Heritage Foundation.
Right.
And we heard in our episode earlier today, Kevin Roberts say that they implement a policy of radical incrementalism. And you may remember before Roe was overturned, if you spoke to a moderate friend that was going to vote Republican, you'd say, well, I'm really worried about Roe. And that friend would say, oh, they'll never overturn it. Well, then it got overturned. And a lot of women came out in the aftermath of that. I'd say the first few months. I'll never vote Republican again. They lied. The Supreme Court justices lied. This is outrageous. Well, they got a little increment. There was incremental progress for the American Taliban, AKA the Heritage Foundation. And then all of a sudden, all the panic starts to assuage. And 92% of 2020 Trump voters are going to triple down again. And so this policy that the American Taliban, AKA the Heritage Foundation, of radical incrementalism, it's telling everybody that this works because Brett Kavanaugh's not the only person that's groomed by the Heritage Foundation that's on the court. And all of these people are radical Catholics, of members of the Opus Dei, which I'm in the process of kind of researching right now. You've got Alito, who is a complete lunatic. This Supreme Court is so out of touch with the modern world. You have this portion of the American public that is progressing. You see women in positions of power. You see the embracing of equality across minority groups, the LGBTQIA plus groups. And you see people that have decency and compassion that want to help marginalized communities because that makes us stronger. And then you have this evil, nefarious group that cozies up to dictators and has written a 900-page manifesto that could only rival Mein Kampf. And you have rich, white businessmen welcoming these people. They were last night welcomed to Oklahoma City. And all the time they act like they're so patriotic. They act like, oh, we're so pro-America. Do not buy into this. They want a second American revolution. And they recruit dipshits like Kavanaugh to execute their plan. But I'm old enough to remember watching the Clarence Thomas hearings. And I just think whenever you have women that have stated in detail how they have been sexually harassed, sexually assaulted, the Supreme Court, there's only 9 picks. Right. Can we get somebody who doesn't fuck with women?
Apparently not. Because that was my whole thing when Kavanaugh was being in his confirmation process. There's somebody better, full stop.
They don't want it.
They don't want somebody better. They humiliated this woman. She has been through hell and back because she came forward to do the right thing. And it turns out she wasn't the only one. She was just the only one that made a point to go to Congress. Everybody else was shoved to the side. It is so infuriating. And the Supreme Court used to be such a valued institution. Like, it really, as an attorney, like, you revered it. You had so much respect for their opinions. You thought they were fair-minded, took their personal views out of issues based on the law. This Supreme Court is just a fucking clown car of prejudice and bias. And it's just disgusting.
Well, and don't forget that the wives of 2 of these Supreme Court justices, one of them, Jenny Thomas, ass deep in alligators planning the insurrection.
Right.
I mean, come on.
And he didn't recuse.
It's pitiful. And then you've got Sam Alito's whacked out nut job wife who has this penchant for collecting weird anti-American Christian nationalist flags. I mean, the cult is within the Supreme Court. And all of this, all roads lead back to the Heritage Foundation. It is the most dangerous think tank in America. They should have a seat nowhere. They hang out with Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban hangs out with Vladimir Putin all the time. And guess who plays slap and tickle? We're going to be phone BFFs, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. The difference is Vladimir Putin knows exactly what he's doing. He's diabolical. They have been, radicalizing Trump to be a Russian asset for years, playing a long game there. And these nefarious actors know the best way into American democracy, the best way to pierce it, is go to the people that have no backbone, that don't stand up for anything, that will sell their wives, their daughters, their gay kids, their black neighbors right down the river. And who is that? Rich white men will.
Right.
Because they say they're Christian and they say they're pro-American, but the only thing they value is money. There's not an ounce of patriotism, not an ounce of morality, not an ounce of decency. It is performative religiosity, performative patriotism, and we have to expose it because it is penetrating. They have a whole right-wing media echo chamber, and they operate to a dumbed-down public that is very falls prey to fear-based threats. And they've been wildly successful at it, but the only way that we can continue to expose this is to put light on it and try to use our microphones to talk about what the MAGA agenda is. And don't be fooled, listener. Waiting right behind 78-year-old in horrible health Donald Trump is J.D. Vance, a 40-year-old psychopath.
Oh, absolutely. Who changes on a dime whichever way the wind blows. And here's the thing that bothers me. There's so many things that bother me. We've got Trump lying about the hurricane. Now we've got the Supreme Court that everybody knew Kavanaugh was a sexual abuser. Nobody gave a shit. They pushed him through. And then nobody can even think about how corrupt and awful and sad that is for our country, because then we find out Trump's buddied up with Putin sending COVID stuff during the pandemic while Americans are dying. The shit never stops with him. When are people going to say it's enough?
Well, I just want to close with this. Trump and the right wing is trying to bash right now the Biden administration about the hurricane relief. And if you talk to the people on the ground, the governors, the mayors, they say the Biden administration has been A+. Say whatever you want to about Biden. He is a kind person.
Right.
He's a very compassionate person. He's not a dick like Donald Trump that's going to be like, how many people in your city voted for me?
Right.
How many Republicans are in that area? He would never do that. But you know who failed a national crisis? Donald Trump and the COVID relief situation. He's the one that shut the country down. And then he started psycho tweeting weird shit like free Minnesota, free Michigan. And I'm like, you're the president.
Right.
You free it. Open it back up. I mean, and then they had that truck rally and all that weird stuff. And then you have so many people in like right-wing Twitter echo chambers that are still like promoting all this anti-vax stuff. I mean, this is just a cult of anti-science people that cannot critically think. And then you have these really evil, wealthy white men who are not curious about anything other than consolidating white patriarchal power. And they know how they can pitch it to a dumbed down, terrified public with a right-wing media echo chamber. And it's really terrifying.
It is. It's terrifying. And Donald Trump is the perfect stooge for that because he doesn't give a fuck about anybody but himself.
All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
It's so entertaining. Tap the vein. So good.